So image of the priest bowing before the ark. All we see them doing is those ritual gestures in front of the ark, but we don't see the presence that they are witnessing. Materialist, secularist, enlightened. Oh, yeah. All myths are nonsense. Because we were talking about myth last time with Gerard and the scapegoat and the problem of mythology concealing the sacrifice is one layer of it. Now we're trying to get to this. Tolkien, the fantasy industry is enormous. The movie industry of green screen projection of other realities is enormous because we're clearly participating in this desire for dragons. The dragon is the motif tonight that Tolkien taps into, and this also comes up in my course, and I explored in the Tolkien videos. Americans are still embarrassed by this longing for fantasy, even as we make it into a giant industry. It's like we can make money off of it. Okay, it's okay. The contract magic, right? The spinning of gold magic, the dragons on the top of piles of treasure magic. The soul participation that Tolkien was actually trying to describe of what it happens when we're enchanted and find ourselves in that reality is curiously, it's like we're embarrassed by it. To say a McLuhan-y thing, we would not be in the problem we are right now with the media and the problem with people's emotional reactions to this absorption in the media if in fact we were more honest about our desire to be absorbed into that reality.
It's a frigidity. There's a Western frigidity. It's not physical, it's spiritual frigidness. That's the Anglo problem. And it's because they've rejected the Song of Solomon. Because of this mystical wedding that the West are not participating in the liturgy, and also Westerners being quite shy to read that love song expressively and to participate in it themselves. Modernity would not produce a Song of Solomon. We don't have that love. We don't have that deep, passionate, Solomonic desire for God, which is why I think I sound the way I sound, because it was Solomonic people that brought me into the Coptic faith. And the Semites have this inherent understanding of the richness and beauty of the unification between the lover and the beloved. It's embedded linguistically in the language with the way that they speak, the gender in the language that English has lost, which really, in my brain, English lost its Semitic nature in this kind of way of thinking about how the language works. But the West also is very uncomfortable with this kind of depth of passion. It's not expressive, it's become frigid.
Frozen even.
Spiritual damage.
Frozen. Why Frozen is such a problem.
Yeah. So I was making the joke this week about Muammar Gaddafi's son, the hot one that died. But it was this kind of meditation on that part of the world and that kind of culture when they fall in love, and all of the poetry that happens when they fall in love. And the Western world wants it. We're producing love songs all the time. It's infused in pop music, and it's pretty much the only thing that musicians ever write or sing about. But in terms of our culture as New World Westerners, the white Anglo culture is cold. It does not have it, which is why this reporting on what the Lebanese are up to, it casts a shadow over everything else. That passion is missing. It's gone from the Anglo culture. And so when they see it in others, when they see it in Catholics, it's terrifying to them, because they're looking at something that they don't have, they haven't participated in.
They used to have it. They used to have Mary. They used to have my first book on the commentaries on the Song of Songs. Several of the texts are by people who were English, lived in England. We continue to meditate on the tragedy of the 16th century and the erasure of this liturgical life. We're going to read from the Song of Songs for a moment. Let him kiss me with the kiss of his mouth, for thy breasts are better than wine. Smelling sweet of the best ointments, thy name is as oil poured out. Therefore young maidens have loved thee. Draw me, we will run after thee to the odor of thy ointments. The king has brought me into his storerooms. We will be glad and rejoice in thee, remembering thy breasts more than wine. The righteous love thee. I am black, but beautiful, O ye daughters of Jerusalem, as the tents of cedar, as the curtains of Solomon. Which I could go on, right? But which, of course, is all commented in the medieval tradition as a wedding of Christ and humanity, or Christ and Mary in the liturgical meditations. But this you were right. Your insight, the inspiration that you had was totally correct. That we are always talking about this wedding in the liturgical context. And that we don't see this joy in not just in the fertility, which is the sadness of the present, but in this, it's all like colors and blending and beauty and joy. And that's what Tolkien is constantly trying to describe in his fairy stories. It's like the wine and the and so it's ironic to me, of course, that anybody ever says that Tolkien, is boring for women to read. It's like, are you kidding? It's just simmering constantly, right? He's doing nothing but telling his love for his wife and the great love story that they lived, right? His Beren and Luthien story. But it's like, how can you be in the presence of someone who is so much in love and not get it?
The Anglosphere concussion. I don't know.
That they can't see when the priest goes in and is at the ark is the presence of Christ in the incense and song, and that all of this liturgical performance is about. And now we've come back around to here. Christ is not on the altar but on the ark, which is saying that temple liturgy is fulfilled in Christ. The presence of Christ on the altar in the Saint Gregory masses is meant to be showing the presence of God in this realization. But go back to our previous episode with the Girardian scapegoat problem. It's like we've been transformed by the crucifixion to see the reality of God's love for us.
No, this is why the Lebanese were angry.
Yes,
because you can't have love without anger. They're in love with Christ. The culture has fallen in love with Christ. They're animated by this Solomonic desire. And so when you have a bunch of fluoro-haired neo-Vikings that try and storm your church where your beloved comes to visit you on the altar and give you his body and his blood, of course you're going to get angry. Then, of course, they smash a crucifix in the process. So they're defacing an icon of the beloved. And then all the whites are wondering why the wogs are getting angry. It's because they're in love and you're barbarians. Anglo-barbarians, and the neo-Vikings don't get it. So then they're saying, oh, they're white supremacists, because they don't have the language to even conceptualize this as a reality. They've lost it. I don't know what language they're speaking, but it's this magical thinking of the priest is there and bada boom, and then they think abracadabra turns into it turns into something else, because they don't have the wine. The water is not being turned into wine for them.
Well, this is our problem. Right, it's like what we're trying to accomplish in our arc travels is we somehow, you by way of we both came at it from different directions in terms of our journey. You through the Catechism and the Coptic Church, me through all this reading of medieval texts, and you say, and suddenly we find we're talking about the same thing, and nobody else in the world, nobody else, right? It's hard for those in our usual environments in the Anglo world to understand what we're talking about, and we just sound nuts. And so Tolkien does try to explain. Tolkien successfully explains all of this to C.S. Lewis, who then becomes Christian but not Catholic, which is a little bit of a problem. And then Lewis, spends his life trying to convey this insight that he had, this moment of joy, surprised by joy. He talks about that in his conversion story, of being able to get that the myths are real in this way that he had been longing for all along, and that they're more real than real. Both of them became very popular, for their storytelling, suggests that the hunger is there, that people want this liturgical experience, but therefore it's curious that there can still be so much resistance in different ways, right? And I think you and I are you and I are navigating a lot of different conversations to figure out, saying it's embarrassing, or Casey had been saying earlier, embarrassed by mystery, right? That mystery does seem to be embarrassing. We want science to have proved everything and the mysteries to be unlocked and no more mysteries. And it's like, but do you really want to live in a context in which there's no mystery? It means there's nothing but the flat of the natural. Right, no supernatural.
This is how the Anglo polices the Celt in Australia. Right. This is what they did, which is why I continuously talk about this topic. Now you framed it, and I'm really happy that you did, because they're embarrassed, and then they're trying to police other people from entering Faërie. They're trying to police Celts from retaining this enchanted religious reality. Whenever anybody says, okay, so this is our culture, this is our religion, this is who we are, we're explaining to you. You don't get to explain to us who we are. We're explaining to you who we are. We're ashamed for it. And you see it in the way people correct me all the time when I say Lebanese aren't white or St. Augustine is not white. People instantly correct me. I know what I'm talking about. We know who we are. We know who we're talking about. We get to explain it to you. This is the colonial problem. And this is a big issue with the leftists, because I think fundamentally deep down, everybody that's been damaged by the English language, the post-16th century Enlightenment Anglosphere tried to disenchant the planet in this capitalistic mass global supply chain supermarket experience, right? You've got all of these indigenous people and you've got all of these different cultures that have been smooshed into this supply chain, and they're angry.
Right.
They're turning to leftism. They're saying, blah, 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 white supremacy, this, that. We're going to pull down the statues of all the old white men, blah, 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 blah. Okay. Conservatives look at this and they say this is anti-white hatred. I don't look at it like this. I look at it and I go, I see a bunch of indigenous people that got absorbed into a global supply chain by force in many cases. They had their languages and their cultures disenchanted.
Right.
They were fed this frigid way of behaving and speaking, and now they're angry, and that's why they're trying to decolonize everything. They want to be Catholics, indigenous Catholics, with an actual expression and experience of the iconostasis, entering Faërie, entering this time travel experience, because everyone running on Greenwich isn't time traveling. It's just around and around and around.
Yep.
So you're stuck in Greenwich. So no wonder they're all like, this sucks. I mean, is it any wonder? The funny thing is, when we're trying to defend ourselves from being colonized, we get called white supremacists. It's like, no, it doesn't work like that. So that's why I'm always hitting back at this language, because I don't want to speak that dialect, whatever it is. I don't know what you call it. The supply chain dialect. I don't want to speak it anymore.
Well, it's the white English, ironically. What Tolkien wanted to write in.
He was writing in Dragon.
He's writing in Dragon because he has this lovely discussion about the power of language and enchantment and how it works. He's talking about mythology and stories about Odin the Goth and the necromancer, the glitter of crows, blah, blah, blah. Small wonder that spell means both a story told, a spell, a story, and a formula of power over living men. Stories are spells. This is one of the most famous passages for me, and he's talking about the power of language, its relationship to story, therefore mythology, and say our incarnation is part of our reality of telling stories. The incarnate mind, the tongue, and the tail are in our world coeval. So it's not mythology is not a disease of language and allegory and things like that, but language is somehow a product of the storytelling, right? The human mind endowed with the powers of generalization and abstraction sees not only green grass, discriminating it from other things and finding it fair to look upon, but sees that it is green as well as being grass. But how powerful, how stimulating to the very faculty that produced it was the invention of the adjective. No spell or incantation in Faërie is more potent, and that is not surprising. Such incantations might indeed be said to be only another view of adjectives, a part of speech in a mythical grammar. The mind that thought of light, heavy, gray, yellow, still, swift, also conceived of magic that would make heavy things light and able to fly, turn gray lead into yellow gold, and the still rock into swift water. If it could do the one, it could do the other. It inevitably did both. When we can take green from grass, blue from heaven, and red from blood, we have already an enchanter's power upon one plane, and the desire to wield that power in the world external to our minds awakes. It does not follow that we shall use that power well upon any plane. We may put a deadly green upon a man's face and produce a horror. We may make the rare and terrible blue moon to shine, or we may cause woods to spring with silver leaves and rams to wear fleeces of gold and put hot fire into the belly of a cold worm. But in such fantasy, as it is called, new form is made. Faërie begins. Man becomes a sub-creator. When he got alchemy in there, lead into yellow gold, but also the problem of the mass, speaking the words and the transformation. Yes. This is my body. So that's the one level, that language and adjective is describing things as they are and as they might be, and transformation by way of description is the power of fantasy. But then it flips over, and this is what you're saying, that by way of fantasy we actually see our world clearly, that we do see the green grass, we do see the yellow sun, we do see the beautiful, and that taking one takes the other away. We can't see clearly without fantasy.